Vinod Kumar from Chubb and Sabine Malik from Rapid 7.
I'm sorry.
No, please, absolutely.
Over to you, Sandeep, sir.
Hello. Hi, good morning to everybody. So we are starting right now. What's that?
So they are requesting for a group photograph first.
Can we do it at the end? Yeah, we'll do it at the end.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so to start this session, we have a surprise speaker. It's Dr. S. Chakravarti, who was a civil servant for a long time, for almost 40 years, and he has retired almost 30 years ago. And he has a very, illustrious career. He was a first-class first in his university in math and stats. Then he got a PhD from IIT Delhi, and then law degree from Delhi University. And he has certifications in public administration and public enterprises from University of Manchester and Harvard University. And he has written books on IPR and competition. It's a very interesting name, IPR Bride and Competition Groom. Another book he has written is Privacy Right and Data Protection. And also another one that he's writing right now is on artificial intelligence. So he will give a very short presentation or very short opening remarks on the topic of AI IP for about 10 minutes before we start the panel officially. Thank you. Please, sir.
Thank you, Professor Sandeep, for your generous introduction. It's a little overwhelming to me. Thank you. I've been asked to take on the mic in the opening to say a few words about artificial intelligence, whether you need to regulate it at all or not, and also link it up with IPR policy and so on. The title itself is very interesting, India AI Mission, providing an opportunity to position India as a global leader. I would like to mention to you at the outset that as Professor Sandeep has categorically mentioned, about 10 minutes for me. Normally I have a feeling, I have an experience that I get carried by my own voice. There's a problem. But then you must be considerate to me because of the fact that I'm 88 and I'm sure you'll be indulgent enough if I slightly overrun on time. Thank you. Indigenous models, data sets, compute infrastructure are expected to become strategic national assets. So I was advised to present a keynote address covering the role of IPRs in the national policy and relating it to the manner in which the data collected on IPRs could be better handled by AI tools, artificial intelligence tools, and if use of AI needs to be regulated at all. This is a vast area and cannot be addressed in the 10 minutes allotted to me. I'll attempt to do this in terms of a short mention of the different dimensions germane to the substantive subject of AI's rule and the need or otherwise to regulate AI. The reason I was advised to do this opening remarks is that I had authored a book, as was mentioned, on IPR and competition law. All of you are aware, IPR creates monopoly rights and competition law or antitrust law is against, frowns on monopoly. So how to marry them? So I called the title of the book IPR Bride and Competition Groom. So I'll marry them in that by my book. So that book was in the knowledge of Métis, and then they said, you please have a session on this. Right. Levity apart, AI can play a substantive role in the process of grant of IPRs by the regulator, like Controller General of Accounts and so on. In case of patent grants, a lot of search takes place if the claimed invention or creativity has been made earlier by somebody else, some third party, in the world, not only in India. The search is manual, but if you have AI, it can do it at less cost and more speed. Scanning documents and data can be done by AI with least error and substantive speed. Data, particularly big data, you are all aware of, is humongous, huge in volume. It is described in terms of 5 V's, V for victory, V's. First is velocity, speed at which the amount of data is generated. Second is volume, incredible amount of data generated. 3, value, worth of the data extracted. 5, variety, worth of the data. Variety is difficult types of data is collected, so it's the variety. And finally, trustworthiness. This trustworthiness is quality and whether the particular data is got trustworthy when it comes out. So these are the 5 V's of big data. Now, as you know, IPR, it deals with a lot of data. Now, IPR at its core has data technology, innovation, and trust. AI tool can be designed to handle these dimensions. The AI framework should be so designed that it does not supplant human intelligence or efforts, but supplements or augments the human intelligence. It is not a substitute for human intelligence, but it augments human intelligence, so it is much more effective and efficient. AI's design should ensure that innovation is protected, bias is avoided, discrimination is prohibited, privacy is not violated. Let me briefly touch on the upsides and downsides of AI in the context of IPRs, and in particular, I can say IPR I'll start with, but in addition to that, generally AI tool is applied in a number of sectors outside IPRs. Now, I will mention upsides and downsides very briefly before I go to the other part. If you look at the upsides, the good part of it, AI has been very beneficial to society. So it is during the current 5th industrial revolution is defined by AI and its deep association into everyday life. AI is often described as technology enabler with multiplier effect because it strengthens the existing system rather than operating in isolation. Our Honorable Prime Minister has emphasized during many an occasion that technology in India must be democratized both in its use and development, and that every section of the society must benefit from it. That's very important. Every section of the society, not just somewhere you apply it. Relating his call to industrial progress, India is moving towards high automation environment where AI systems manage, that AI tools, they manage inspection, assembly, intra-logistics with minimal human presence. That is what AI can do. Now, there are many more upsides, but time constraint compels me to skip them. Just one aspect of healthcare, let me place before you for your information. You are already aware of it. In the area of healthcare and wellness of citizens, AI can be a critical tool on how it should serve the hospitals, clinics, and citizens subject to appropriate guardrails. AI can reshape diagnostics, personalized treatment pathways, and influence designing of clinical trials and experiments. In the fields of radiology and pathology, AM systems have demonstrated their ability to flag subtle abnormalities, prioritize high-risk cases, and reduce diagnostic cost and delay. So these are all upsides of AI. AI can do so much.
May I request to finish in 1 minute?
Huh?
Can you finish in 1 minute?
Yeah.
Yeah.
1 minute?
Yeah.
My God.
It's
I got
already-
to say something more important than this.
10 minutes.
Okay, I'll take 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay. What are the downsides? I will not go into the downsides except to mention that a number of things, for instance, AI is proliferating so much that its information flow, surveillance capability, communication, and the like are all affected in a particular way. Cyber crime is intensifying with sophisticated hackers. They are using advanced AI tool to penetrate fragile defenses of corporate entities and citizens. So these are downsides. So once you have completed the downsides and upsides, I will now turn to an important thing. The newest concern relates to copyright, which is also the IPR. Generative AI allows people to create images, prose, and sound-based prompts. Artists and creative persons are calling AI as vampirical, not empirical, vampirical, because it scrapes pre-existing content for training. So that's a big area where copyright has come into the picture. AI has its own problems. Now, I'll skip most of these things except to say that there is what is known as balance required between baneful and beneficial impact of AI. It has got good and bad. How do you balance them? For which India is in the forefront. It is now making in every way, in every industry, a digital transformation being propelled. There's a large growing high-tech workforce and increasing foreign investments. In the context of real-time experience, the rapid development and integration of AI present a series of challenges, but we have to do it. Now, there are some acts like Information Technology Act, Information Technology Rules, and Data Protection Privacy Right Acts and all that. All that will definitely address some AI problems, but not all. I would say it's not an open shut case where these laws which are extant today available can take care of all AI downsides. Some of them will not be. In that context, do we require a new law? We have existing laws. We can deal with it to some extent. But the stance of India is, as mentioned by Minister for Electronics and IT, Mr. Ashwini Vaishnaw, the world is looking at India as a potential leader in developing this new model, in contrast to the legal approach followed. He says, don't have a legal approach, have a techno-legal approach. That is, technology will be fully in the picture to have a legal paradigm. So that's what he said. Now, I will skip all this about AI mission, one word. India has taken up AI mission, which is also mentioned in the brochure here. It is safety is one of the pillars of India's AI mission. It's empaneled to develop technologies for safety, detecting deep fakes, biases, unlearning models, etc. So this is what it's going to do. Now, I'll conclude by saying that there are, ladies and gentlemen, kindly listen to me for 1 minute on this. There are 5 broad principles a la TRIPS, a la IPRs and AI. Number 1, TRIPS agreement, as you know, is a WTO agreement. TRIPS agreement should not be allowed to trip public interest. Where public interest is involved, TRIPS cannot have the last say. It should be, the public interest should have the last say. Number 2, patient, that is people who are sick, patient interests need to trump patent interests. Patients are more important than patents. So when I say to trump patent interests, I am not referring to Donald Trump. Now, 3, in public good, private respects must be final. 4, protect innovation, namely IPRs, but remember, IPR laws must have their say, but antitrust competition law must have its way. IPRs can have their say, but competition law must have its final way. And finally, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, in formulating a new law, AI law, better to follow a Latin maxim, Latin saying, festina lente, which means hasten slowly. Do your law slowly, gradually, and do it well, but don't rush into it. Go step by step, and you'll develop yourself very well as a country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chakravarti. So now we can officially start the panel. We have a number of panelists, and we have 34 minutes. So we have to be really, really brief, and we should first question. So the way I want to do this is to first ask a question for everybody. So one by one, they will say what they think about this, and then we'll have a couple of questions that are meant for individuals. And then finally, a common question for everybody else. So we are running against time here. So the first question, I will start with you, Anne, but then we'll go to the others. What are the major IP-related challenges for AI training and AI-generated content? What are who owns the IP, and what to do with the data rights, and what about the generated outputs? Who owns them?
So first of all, I just want to thank everyone for putting together such a wonderful conference, and IBM is really thrilled to be here and part of these important conversations about the US-India partnership around AI. I think the way I would think about your question maybe a little differently, and that's to focus on the importance of creating an environment where you can accelerate innovation and you can democratize even innovation, leveraging things like open source. So when I think about open source, Dr. Chakravarti, he mentioned looking at it like a marriage, looking at it like a bride and a groom. And I think the real benefit is to think about it in a very balanced way. What you want to do with open source is make sure that you have the foundation of openness and transparency, but also make sure on the back end that you embed in your IP laws and your IP framework the opportunity to make sure that downstream creation is protected. So for IBM, we've long since been invested in open source as a foundation. Our Granite family of foundation models are recognized as the most transparent in the world, and they're really based on things like trust, auditability, but it also leverages and leans into collaboration. And that's really what's important as we think about how to accelerate innovation in India, is making sure that governments and particularly regulated sectors have the benefit of accelerated innovation at the same time they have the benefit of IP protections. So we heard yesterday Prime Minister Modi acknowledge that India is now the third largest source of startups. And this is particularly important when you think about open source. Startups can really leverage the infrastructure of open source models without reinventing the wheel. So when you think about researchers, when you think about public institutions and startup companies, that's really where the benefit resides, is just being able to build on top of something without reinventing the wheel. So as long as India's IP frameworks and laws evolve in a way that allows creation to leverage open source models and technology, all while not letting it spin out of control and become a free-for-all, this can be a competitive advantage.
Thank you, Anne. So I'll go to Rajni.
No, first of all, thank you for having me, and let's get straight to the question. I know this is a question. If we have to start talking about challenges, I think we can spend the whole hour that we don't want to do, right? I've worked with multiple GCCs, and GCCs today, as they're trying to find their footing in AI, one thing is very, very clear. I think we all know that the Wild West is over. We have to start thinking about ownership, right? And the biggest challenge, me as an AI leader, is to and I know the AI potential, right? I know it has incredible potential, but the challenge is how do I quantify ROI? Because that's what everybody is asking from me as an AI leader. And if you think about from a quantification perspective, if you don't even know if you own it, how do you even, estimate a value that is coming out of it? So the whole link problem, I call it as the ownership value link problem. There are multiple hurdles which are not letting me come to a good ROI value that I can showcase, right? And if I have to just give a few examples of those ROI challenges, which are of course linked to the ownership, the number one will be the whole quality trap. We are using AI to actually train AI model, the synthetic data, right? Maybe in few years that model will collapse and you'll probably end up in two situations. Number one is either your model is very noisy or your model is very less volatile. Noisy example is, AI, we love personalized recommendation. So everyone is getting their personalized recommendation. If each of these personalized recommendation, if you collect it together, build a master data, maybe the AI will not be able to find any pattern. It just becomes a noise. On the other side, every consumer behavior is changing so fast. If you use old AI data to train new AI model, it won't be able to understand what's happening today. Our behavior, digital footprint before COVID, after COVID, very different. Digital footprint after these cyber attacks, the financial attacks that are happening is very different. And maybe our footprint, digital footprint after this AI summit will be very, very different, right? So everything is changing fast and it's creating a recursive, a secondary order AI risk for us. Second is the model and infra is expensive. I have to spend so much of money in building model and ensuring, I'm paying that monthly rent for the infra. And if you ask me today, will I be able to do this consistently for all my customers going forward? I don't have an answer. And if I don't have a long-term answer of the cost and risk, I cannot associate a value around it. The third one, I think it gets little scary from all of us side, is some of these attacks. I don't know if you all know the IP injection attack. There are reverse engineering prompt attacks that are happening. Those are actually real, It's probably not attack, it's IP heist, right? So I don't know if I own the data. I have to pay a lot of money on legal and risk costs. The infra, cost is very, very high. And whatever I have, I know it's not safe. So calculating that ROI is a big challenge for me.
Thank you. Sabine?
So I'm going to pick up on something that, our speaker and also you just mentioned too, which is, in the AI era, IP is digital, replicable, and globally distributed. We know that. And legal recognition alone just really isn't enough in this environment. And enforcement now is really what requires a lot more of the, I think, innovation piece in the legal regime. And we just have not focused on that a lot. As a cybersecurity provider, first of all, Rapid7 is so excited on kind of the AI summit and to be able to bring that thread along in this arena because, again, securing our digital foundations without that trust is not built. And you can't innovate on these models as much as India has really been a pioneer in terms of thinking about, again, the digital public infrastructure with regards to AI models. The reality of it is that when it comes to enforcement, the line between using cyber techniques and IP enforcement is still very blurry when it comes to the legal versus then thinking about who are the analysts that are doing that work. And this is, I think, a really neglected area. We need a lot more sort of co-branding, I think, between the legal side of the house and sort of thinking about what is new in this area. And one thing that I think India and the US can work a lot on is thinking about watermarking, provenance tracking, and automated infringement detection. I think we really need to work on these areas together and are going to be the new frontiers, not just innovation for the sake of, again, thinking about what we usually think about in terms of whether we're using synthetic data or we're using, as you were saying earlier to me, is it a song or something that you've generated or, a novel with AI, but really to even think about how do we, from a traditional where we are as a mental model and legal frameworks, what is it that can actually get us grounded in whether or not we can even find who the owner is to begin with? I think those tools are really super antiquated, and we need to do more in this area.
Great. Thank you. Nitin?
Good morning. My governing thought is that AI is changing so dramatically that our traditional thinking around IP and IP frameworks, I think, is quite limited. I don't think, see, with AI, fundamentally what's happening is that data, insights, and intelligence itself, which traditionally all three were scarce, are becoming abundant. They're becoming infinite. With what AI, and in particular Gen AI, has done is that it has brought the data of the world, especially unstructured data, into the public domain. Into the public domain. This is a quite a remarkable thing that has happened. So in a world, as we are moving from a data and intelligence scarce world to a data and intelligence abundant world, how can you say that somebody owns it? How can you say somebody owns it? Because it is really, really coming in the public domain. It's kind of at a level, this is like universal consciousness. Okay, if I take a metaphysical, equivalence to this, who owns it? There is a lot more of the collective here. So we keep on asking a lot of traditional questions which are based on traditional management frameworks around who owns it and blah, blah, blah. The reality is that there is no one person. This is a collective. So I think that's the first point I would like to submit, that there is a need to even rethink of the concept of IP and what really we are dealing with, because we are dealing with the historical shift of the nature of information and intelligence. The second point I would make is that when we think about AI, it is not one thing. There is a very kind of lazy equivalence that we begin to make, all problems equal AI, all AI equal to Gen AI. That is not the case. There is Gen AI, which is, of course, that's what has exploded on us over the last 3-4 years. And that is where, we are talking about the universal data. But on top of that, there is the enterprise layer. Most of work that, I do, we do as NCDO is at that enterprise layer, where, you do have the notion of proprietary data, proprietary models, proprietary methods. And then on top of that, increasingly, there is the individual layer. And you have the notion of individual data. So I would submit that we would need to think about the different layers differently. I think the macro layer or the Gen AI layer, I think is, it's going to be very difficult to apply any kind of real restrictive IP. It's not really controllable from my perspective. Enterprise data that's where a lot of that proprietary models or proprietary knowledge resides. That is going to become even more critical, but it is going to be quality over quantity. It is going to be a fraction. Maybe it is 1%, maybe it is less percent of all the data and models that you're talking about, but they are going to be the differentiator. They are going to be the competitive advantage. It's like a bowl of soup in which you put just a pinch of salt, but that gives the taste. So that it is going to be that order of magnitude, but terribly important. So the notion of proprietary knowledge at the enterprise level will become extremely important. And the third level, the individual level, that's where I actually worry the most. That is, because I think that's where the individual data privacy, I think, is a big, big issue. And I've been talking about it, for the last couple of years, that look, when we sign up for forget AI, but any application, we sign some kind of a waiver or some kind of an agreement. Who reads that? Who reads that? So why should the individual be subjected to something which they are opting to kind of use it without real awareness of it? Whereas almost any other product out there, a car or whatever, when you buy that, it is very clear what you're signing up for. So I think the need for international, for global standards, data privacy standards for individual use is very important. So that's where I would summarize that we are talking at 3 different levels. We should disaggregate that what are we really talking about when we say AI, the macro or the Gen AI level, very difficult to control. This is becoming like a collective asset. Enterprise, very important. That's where the notion of proprietary knowledge is very important. Individual level, that's where there really, really needs to be a lot of focus and effort around establishing international data privacy norms.
Thank you. I just want to say that we have all become products for many of these companies, and you brought it out very well. So next question, for this challenge question, Shardul.
I think the first issue, in my view, which needs to be addressed is what is the question that we are considering. The DPIIT had proposed a mandatory blanket license where AI developers pay royalties into a central fund upon commercialization with rates set by the government committee. Right holders cannot opt out. NASSCOM had expressed strong views on the paper, primarily opposing this proposal, and it takes a view that there should be an exemption or an exception in the Copyright Act for text and data mining for training AI models. It views mandatory licensing as a burden that could hinder AI's innovation in India. The exception would allow for AI models to be trained lawfully without payment. This position is similar to frameworks in Japan, Singapore, and the EU with an opt-out right. Now, what has happened in the context in terms of AI training and the kinds of information that is available? You have registered rights, you have personal rights, and you have other rights. So there would be 3 types of licenses which would be required if AI has to be freely available, divorced of who is the current right holder and who is in the registry of right holders. So that is the primary question as to whether you are in a non-regulated situation, because AI does not deal with generative data. And that's an exclusion which you have to overcome in order that a marriage between AI rights and IP rights is worked out. The question is, what are the major IP-related challenges faced in AI training and through AI-generated outputs? So we have to focus on the major IP-related challenges. So what are the IP-related challenges that arise? The question would be, firstly, the distinction between fair dealing and fair use. The matter is sub judice in the Delhi High Court in the case of ANI versus OpenAI. The issue has to be decided as to who has the authorship, ownership, and liability, because that is unaddressed. It is not an issue which is today clear, and whether a corporate ownership is valid itself is an open issue under the Copyright Act and the patent rights. And then you have the question, which is again an open issue, of personality rights, because the courts have stepped into this area where new rights and new wrongs have been developed concerning personality rights. So unless and until you really create that opening in the Copyright Act by providing a legislative exception to the principle of allowing text and data mining, you cannot really override the AI rights, because people have built those rights in expectation of a future income.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Thank you very much, and thank you to NASSCOM for convening this important panel. I'm Jennifer Mulvaney with Adobe, and I am responsible for our government relations and public policy interactions in APAC, which is a very exciting place to be right now given AI. But Nitin, you hit on a really good point around generative AI versus AI generally, and anyone who's used Photoshop for as long as it's been around has been using AI longer than sort of the recent explosion in the generative AI hype recently, and that's something that we have been considering for a long time in our positioning and how we approach governments. So I don't think there's a government in the world right now that is not trying to figure out this balance of how to protect innovation or advance innovation while also protecting copyright and intellectual property rules. And it's a tough one. I really don't envy policymakers in this space. They have various stakeholders that they have to look at, and I think the one that Adobe spends the most time in is the creative sector, given that creativity is in our DNA, and we consider ourselves to be the most creative company in the world. Artists everywhere rely on our tools to advance their trade and support their livelihood. And understandably, they are concerned with what generative AI means for their future and for livelihood in terms of what data can be trained on and what are the rules around outputs, et cetera. We have a couple of ideas on that front that we have promoted most recently in our submission to the Indian government as it looks at its copyright rules. And one is really focusing on the output and what is it that is actually going to make a difference in terms of how creatives are supported in this new AI world. One of the things that we have mentioned, and we think this is really important, is that creatives, when they are using an AI tool, such as an Adobe creative software or any other type of tool, they should have the ability to opt out and say that I do not want my work to be trained on. And within Adobe's tools, we actually allow that through, Sabine, I think you mentioned content credentials and provenance. So the provenance tools that we have in our products allow an artist to say, or a creative or a marketer to say, I don't want my work to be trained on. Now, the question is whether or not that's going to be honored, right? It's one thing to say this is what I want, but is this actually going to be something that's going to be taken into consideration when that work goes through its cycle, posted to social media, et cetera? And we actually think that governments should look at how that can be honored and should that be enforced if someone makes that claim. Secondly, you talked, Dr. Shardul, about rights and different types of rights. And one right that we think is sort of noticeably absent from a lot of IP frameworks and laws around the world is the impersonation right, or the ability for a creative to take a right of action if they feel like their personality or their work has been intentionally ripped off for economic gain. So that's something we have looked at. We've proposed that here in the Indian context of looking at these rules. There's some legislation that's been considered in the United States around this that would, I think, create a new right for people that feel like their livelihood is being seriously undermined. So I think there are ways to at least have a dialogue around this difficult balance of promoting innovation and protecting intellectual property rights. And Adobe is really happy to be at the center of that discussion. So thank you for the session here today.
Yeah, so thank you all of you for bringing out some of the major challenges. Unfortunately, we have 11 minutes and we have a lot of more questions. In fact, this kind of topic requires multi-day workshop, not a 50-minute thing. Regarding this, recently there is a Chinese app that is creating lifelike Hollywood movie clips with real Hollywood actor personas, right? Question is, how legal it is, and I think these kind of things are going to happen more and more, right? So, and this is the kind of thing that we are all very worried about. But the one thing that in India we are worried about, and I think I'll start with Jennifer, is that startups, AI startups, right? And small businesses, they are without proper legal clarity. They are not going to be very confident about what they are going to do. And even though we have a lot of startups, the startups do not have a clarity as to if they build models, if they build products, what is the future if there would be a legal problem and all that. So how do you see this, what can we do in the interim until we have a better understanding of the IP rights?
Right, so I go back to what I was just mentioning. I'll just elaborate on it a bit more. I do think that one of the most important things is for them to be able to go into their trade and feel as if they can have that legal framework or that legal recourse that they need. Particularly, we've all talked about how quickly AI is taking off, and we all know it's not a secret that mostly speaking, laws can't keep up with technology.
Yes.
We can barely keep up with it as people that do this on a regular basis and understand the technology. So I do think that countries do have to consider the existing legal frameworks, what needs to be changed on the legal front versus letting things be taken up by the courts, as that's generally the way things are taken up in the United States. I think to allow, particularly I can speak most specifically to the creative sector, and you're right about the entertainment and media sector here in India is certainly going to be sensitized to this. I do think that there should be a right for impersonation, like you just mentioned. I think there should be something to be considered of what exists and what more can be out there to protect artists' livelihood. And then this right of saying, do not train on my work. If I'm going to create something, regardless of whether or not it's still not clear who owns that work, whether it's you own it or not, it's still if I did create this, I should be able to say, do not train on my work. So I think things like that. That's just a starting point. This is not something that Adobe considers to be a silver bullet. It's not something that we think is the answer. But this dialogue of just putting some ideas on the table with startups in mind, with creatives in mind, with business in mind, I think is really, really important. And I do think that most countries in the world are doing a very good job, including of India, of opening up that stakeholder process and listening to different perspectives, which I think is absolutely critical.
Thank you. So Rajni, can you add to that with the institutional support?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's, and again, as an AI leader, I have been there. I do this every day. There are probably 5 important institutional support that we can provide to startups. I think number 1 is give us the pre-vetted data. Come on. If you already give me a pre-vetted clean data, I'm saving 60% of my time, right? Second, help me democratize compute. You have millions of different startups, but they're looking for their own compute. Can we democratize compute so that we can share the cost? The third one is lab to market, and this is where I need universities to help us build products which are ready for market, right? All the AI research that's happening, we have to start thinking about how we can directly contextualize for a business and sell in the market, right? So it cannot be an AI research product. It has to be a real AI product that can go there. The fourth one, which I think is very, very critical, is future skills. I know, there is a high time that the law policy starts understanding code and code starts understanding law policy, right? So we have to start building talent using the right skill to ensure that while they know coding, while they know AI, we have to ensure they know that how to build AI which is safe and trusted. They understand all the laws, all the policies, and they are applying in their day-to-day life. So I think the whole fundamental of institutional support is it should not create a speed bump. It should actually create like a pitch curve so that if we face any challenges, the startup should be able to get a smooth curve or smooth movement from there, not spinning out.
Thank you. So next question is for Anne. You spoke about IBM's commitment to open source, but open source also is kind of IP sovereignty. These things are kind of against using open source all the time for all kinds of products. So how do you balance this two?
So I want to pick up on a couple of things that have been said so far and intersect that with this notion of governance, because open source is there is a balance, right, between innovation and creativity, borrowing the underlying models and then building protections for what's created on top. But governance is incredibly important as a partner to the IP legal framework. And there are already, the good news, right, is that I think India is already thinking about governance, borrowing from frameworks like Singapore's AI Verify and NIST's framework. They're already borrowing from things like that as they think about how to embed more governance and ethics into the models from an operational standpoint. But what I would say that echoes some of the things that other people have already mentioned is the importance of, when you think about the principles in AI governance, you've got sort of transparency, explainability, but you also now have an increasingly more spoken about principle around auditability. So auditability, I think, also starts to address some of the questions about, if you build a consent feature into how do I know that you've honored my consent? If you are trying to trace ownership for, when you think about it from the legal standpoint, enforcement, how do I know, who owns what? And so auditability is an increasingly important element of AI governance that intersects really nicely with IP legal. And so whether it's open source or whatever type of framework, when you think about governance, that's an important portion of the conversation.
Thank you. So I would like to ask Sabine about what licensing, consent, and compensation mechanism should we adopt?
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to talk about it. I think at the end of the day, look, there's going to be, I think, a little bit, and you, Nitin, sort of talked about this, I think we have to really reconceptualize licensing and thinking about what is it that we're actually doing in terms of the core set of things that is the product on top. And what part of this is open commons, as we talk about open source. India's leading when it comes to kind of, again, these models where they should be sort of plug and play. There's a core set of sort of data that is universal, commons. And then after that, it's licensing depending on what use you're using it for. Is it niche? Is it for the larger public good? Is it specific, sectors that actually can pay or play? And I think we have to really think about this again from a place of what is expected and what is trusted. The other piece to your point on licensing is, I think you have to kind of caveat emptor, to be honest. I think at the end of the day, there is just some data models, integrity-wise, that have to be sort of thought about as just public use. And when it comes to then licensing or paying for that, I think that's a trade-off that countries have to make in terms of what are you producing on top of that. So I think it's a complex question about, again, the model that you're thinking about, this whole panel is about really thinking about, I think, India's approach towards these national assets. And if you're thinking about it as a national construct, then licensing becomes a little bit more of a more deeper question around who should have access, how should that access be developed? Do you subsidize that for then universities and other people that are going to build innovation on top of it? Are you going to then get that money back from other people that are then commoditizing it? So I think there's a little bit more complexity there with the AI overlay, just because, again, data becomes ubiquitous, but you want a common set that's auditable, trustworthy, that we need to think about. And I think one thing you've also sort of maybe is an undertone here is, with licensing and other things, we also have to think about the safety element here, the security element. You're paying for that data to stay integritous. And I think here we haven't heard a lot about sort of, again, making that sort of available. So those are some things that I would point out as you're thinking about a new regime with what we've all talked about. Those are some things that I would hope can be open for discussion as we're thinking about, again, public commons, licensing, and who pays ultimately the cost for that.
Thank you. We have 1 minute left, so I'll ask Shardul to finish his thoughts. He already spoke about legality and data set rights already a little bit, but we can finish off with that.
I think endemic to this whole debate, it's about making a choice. What you're saying is that the government has to make a choice as to whether it embeds a statutory or a constitutional right in relation to what is generic and what is therefore allowable as either mass copying or as a process which really impedes on personal rights or general commercial. Commercial, of course, is a different proposition. So you are effectively asking the government to add an exception to Section 52 from the 3 exceptions which are stated there, to exclude text and data mining in relation to what is an what is a wrong in relation to copyright. Section 52 basically spells out what is the right of intervention through courts, where you can stop something from happening. And what is today absent is the right to intervene when you are to make mass copies and when you have to overlay a software or an application which has that kind of proprietariness or copyright. This is the leap of faith that the government is asked to do, because you are creating a new right from a non-existent right, and that is premised on the basis that all rights which are today registered under the Copyright Act are effectively not going to stop the process of data and text and data mining, so as to interfere in the build-up of a system which is universal. So that is the debate which is faced by the government. Here you have the people who have constructed large networks which have effectively scraped or crawled through all data, irrespective of whether it is copyrighted data or it is personal data or whether it is non-personal data. That is today in the control and custody of the LLMs. Now you're basically saying is, I don't have a right. That's where the GCCs and the small operators have effectively made their say that if we are to enter the market, we don't know whether there is a prior or pre-existing copyright which will stop us. So you have effectively to first and foremost de-recognize all those rights which are general and where there is a personal, whether there is a general use in relation to those rights, because that right interferes in the build-up of an LLM model. After you address this right by creating the exception in section 52, you are saying, give me a freedom to develop a proprietary software over and above that, and let me have the rights where I basically can use that without payment of royalties to anybody. All prior owners of that copyright don't get any revenue in relation to the right which is embedded by law. So this is the dilemma which government faces. Government effectively is asked to make a policy decision that negate the rights at the base, negate the rights which have been created over time, make it an open field and let me build on it. Because that's the only way large commerce can happen.
Thank you. We are out of time, but I will ask if Nitin wants to add some, I'll give him the last word.
Yeah. See, the topic is how should India think about IP and as a national asset. So I'll keep it very brief. I would say less is more. Less is more. I think a friend from Adobe, I think she laid it out well. See, there is a balance between innovation and protection. I think we are at that stage in our AI journey where the overwhelming imperative is innovation. Overwhelming imperative. And we are lagging in that. Let's also call that out, okay? Beyond all the chest thumping. So we need heavy focus on that. Now, of course, for innovation, IP protection is also a necessary guardrail for that. We should focus on what are the obvious extreme cases. You talked about deepfakes or impersonification. There is about the enterprise level, proprietary knowledge protection. There is consumer data privacy. Perhaps there are 5-10 specific issues that need to be addressed, which we should address. But this should not be the topic number one. It should not be the topic number one. Because the more we talk about it, we find excuses not to do things and not to push on innovation. And I think that's what I would submit. Yes, this is very important, but less is more. Let's be surgical. I think Shardul laid it out very nicely that there are some very specific issues that have to be addressed at a foundational level. We should do that, but let's put our energy and focus where it really should be put, which is innovation and growth.
All right, so the debate continues, but I think innovation is the priority as Nitin has laid out. So we'll stop here. This is a topic that needs to be discussed even a lot more. and a lot more elaborately, but it's a start. So I thank all the panelists for their time and for clarity of thought that they have expressed. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. As a token of gratitude, NASSCOM will be planting 10 trees for each speaker, and we'll be sharing digital certificates for it soon. Thank you, everyone.
You want to do the picture?
Yes. And I'll also request to get speakers' memento here.
Okay.